I actually don't know that much about extended Star Wars lore. Let me just preface this whole video with that. But I am in the process of learning a little more about it. I don't think enjoyment of a show should ever rely on understanding the extended lore, though I do feel an understanding usually enhances one's enjoyment of a show like The Mandalorian. No doubt there are Star Wars fanatics who love this show way more than I do, because they're more absorbed in the lore of the Star Wars universe. I've always been a pretty casual Star Wars fan, though I did read Shadows of the Empire when the N64 game came out, so maybe not that casual. I was most into Star Wars around the age of 13 or 14. Then The Phantom Menace came out. Star Wars was never really the same for me after The Phantom Menace. I never bothered watching the TV show Clone Wars because it was part of the prequel universe, which was underwhelming to say the least. So when a character shows up from Clone Wars, it's not going to mean anything to me because I've never taken the time to watch it. I have heard really good things though. I have seen all of the Star Wars films, including Rogue One and Solo. I've seen them all. And I used to watch the original trilogy on VHS over and over again. Every trilogy since the original has disappointed me in some way, though the individual films themselves all vary in their execution. And then The Mandalorian comes along, a show I expected almost nothing from, and what I found was a fresh invigoration of the franchise. First of all, from a purely visual standpoint, this is one of the best looking shows out there. There's an absolutely massive list of animators and effects artists in the credits. The casting is really strong too. Pedro Pascal as the titular Mandalorian is concealed by a mask for 98% of the show, yet he's able to convey just enough through his body and his voice. There's a touch of gruffness. He doesn't sound like Kurt Russell or the Man with No Name or Solid Snake, but he's got a little gravel in his voice. He also comes across stoic and detached from his violent acts. He's a badass, but he also belongs to a warrior cult, so he's a somewhat indoctrinated character. He finds his humanity through the alien child whom he becomes guardian to. Carl Weathers, Nick Nolte, Werner Herzog, Amy Sedaris, Gina Carano, Bill Burr, and Giancarlo Esposito. I think they're all great, especially Werner Herzog. He knows and cares nothing about Star Wars or its lore, and took this role only to fund a personal project, but gives total conviction to his line readings.
Bounty hunting is a complicated profession.
Seeing him basically sold me on the show. The story is bare bones, but it allows a lot of smaller subplots and some good episodic fun. I think of it like video game side quests. In talking about The Mandalorian, I've often heard comparisons to a video game or a Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and I feel like that was my immediate response to watching it as well. A few episodes in, it started to seem like each episode was going to follow the loop of meet an NPC, get a side quest, enter a dungeon, beat a boss, obtain an item, trade said item for an equipment upgrade, move on to the next side quest, with an occasional return to the main quest. It's like a video game that you're watching your friend play. You don't have any control over the action, but it's a fun ride regardless. The Mandalorian is not a character study, it's not social commentary, it's just a simple action adventure with some really stellar production and visual effects. A good original score that doesn't rely on nostalgia for the John Williams score, and some really solid performances from anyone who's got a good connection and always wanted to be a Star Wars character. I was surprised to see comedian Brian Posehn in the first episode, and comedians Amy Sedaris and Bill Burr have fun reoccurring characters too. Its structure has more in common with any of the episodic Star Trek shows than it does with the Star Wars films. I'm more of a Star Trek fan than a Star Wars fan anyway. Chapter 1, The Guest, introduces some of my favorite NPCs, Carl Weathers and Werner Herzog. Yeah, their characters have names. Carl Weathers' character is named Grief Karga. Werner Herzog is named The Client, which isn't really a name, it's probably just what he's called in the script. Werner Herzog gives Mando a main plot quest to secure an asset with the reward of Beskar Steel, which can upgrade Mando's armor. Plot twist is that quest item Baby Yoda is a cute alien creature that Mando will form an affectionate bond with, hence warming his cold warrior nature. Baby Yoda is certainly more adorable than past Star Wars attempts at creating cute and funny characters that just came across as annoying and abrasive and egregious. Baby Yoda is as much a MacGuffin as a character. The plot for the 2 seasons of The Mandalorian revolves around Mando protecting Baby Yoda and rescuing him whenever he gets captured. They also work as a team. This is a gaming trend as of recent years with games like The Last of Us, BioShock Infinite, and God of War 2018. I've heard this referred to as the sad dad trope.
I'm not sad.
Yes, you are.
It also goes back to the samurai story of Lone Wolf and Cub. Star Wars was originally influenced by samurai epics such as Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress and Yojimbo. In Yojimbo, Toshiro Mifune's badass samurai character wanders into the middle of a conflict between 2 opposing sides, and he plays the 2 sides off of each other. It was remade with Clint Eastwood as A Fistful of Dollars. The Mandalorian has a somewhat similar setup, and the show does a good job of returning to these spaghetti western and samurai roots. It also uses those Kurosawa screen wipes that have become so associated with the Star Wars films. It specifically has the feel of the Western show Kung Fu with David Carradine. I have fond memories of watching the show with my dad when it was running in syndication. David Carradine just wanders from town to town using martial arts to help people solve their problems. There was an overarching plot where he was searching for his half-brother, but every episode was a self-contained entity that didn't need to be viewed sequentially. There are less and less of these style shows around, as the long movie format of streaming has made shows more serialized. The Mandalorian's implementation of both serialized and episodic storytelling does provide a refreshing balance. There are 8 episodes per season, and the length of the episodes vary from 25 to 47 minutes. Season 1 is 5 hours and 15 minutes long, and Season 2 is 5 hours and 23 minutes long. I like the shorter length of these seasons as it cuts out a lot of filler. Some episodes feel like filler episodes, but often include a character or quest item that will be more important later on. Also, spoilers for the rest of the video. Chapter 2, The Child. Mando must battle a big monster to get an egg to trade to Jawas who scavenged his ship parts. During the early part of the episode, Mando climbs up the side of a Jawa sandcrawler, which happened in the Super Star Wars video game, but I don't remember it happening in any of the films. This is definitely a side quest episode, but it does set up Baby Yoda's force power ability when Mando fights the big monster. In Chapter 3, The Sen, Mando gets a nice armor upgrade. And the audience gets a flashback to build some backstory for Mando. He can't be the protagonist as just a badass in a cool suit of armor, and the story of how, as an orphan, he was initiated into a cult of warriors adds some complexity. Chapter 3 concludes the main quest that was set up in the first episode. Of course, Mando decides not to give Baby Yoda to the Imperials. This causes some problems with Carl Weathers, and there's a big shootout. It's got some good action in it. At this point, the season deviates into 3 seemingly side quest episodes that all set up characters who will return in later episodes with greater impact. Chapter 4, Sanctuary, is basically the plot of Kurosawa's Seven Samurai, where a group of samurai warriors defend a small farming town from bandits. And this one also introduces Gina Carano's Cara Dune. She's a rebel fighter from the planet Alderaan, and she frequently charges into battle with a heavy blaster and no protective armor covering her head. I guess this is what it means to be a shock trooper. They go up against an ATST with red glowing eyes. That's how you know where the weak spot is. Chapter 5, The Gunslinger, was the worst episode of the season. It was boring, and the villain sucked. He was a young wannabe bounty hunter who turned on Mando, and he never felt like a threat. This only exists to set up the character of Fennec for Season 2. It all takes place on Tatooine. There's a callback where the young, aspiring bounty hunter sits in Han Solo's seat. This felt like a bit of unnecessary fan service. However, most of the fan service in the show is handled well. In Season 2, it will make sense why an episode took place on Tatooine. Chapter 6 might have been my personal favorite of Season 1. I just really liked the ragtag crew of criminals breaking into and out of a prison, and all the backstabbing and double-crossing. In the original Star Wars movie, there was a guy that looked like the big devil guy. I have no idea how to pronounce his name. I'm not even going to try. He had no dialogue, and he was in one shot, yet he has a full page on the Wikipedia. Apparently, he was a music lover. So these red devil-looking people belong to the Devaronian race? Only male Devaronians have horns. Female Devaronians instead have small bumps and full heads of hair. The Devaronian in Mandalorian is named Berg. He's played by Clancy Brown. I like his inclusion here. The brother and sister are Twi'leks. Twi'leks were seen in Return of the Jedi hanging around Jabba's palace, and they were initially background characters. Oh, and this guy, his character is named Raznar Malk, but I just think of him as Bobby from Sons of Anarchy. Chapter 7, The Reckoning, has a getting the band back together feel as Carl Weathers and Cara Dune return. This is the penultimate episode of Season 1 where Baby Yoda is kidnapped, and the following episode, Chapter 8, Redemption, ends on a cliffhanger as Moff Gideon is now going to be the big bad for Season 2, which is great. It's tough to replace the presence of Werner Herzog, but Giancarlo Esposito can certainly fill the shoes. It's weird that he wears the armor that looks like Darth Vader's. Didn't Darth Vader wear that armor because he had been horribly burned? It would probably be easy to pick apart this show in that way, but I'm not going to nitpick stuff like that here. By the way, I had no idea what a darksaber was when I saw this scene. Mando gets a good character arc over the course of the first season, as he initially has this hatred for droids, which he is able to overcome. The IG-11 droid that Mando shot in the first episode, the one who looks like IG-88, a background character from The Empire Strikes Back, is reprogrammed by Nick Nolte's Queel and helps fight alongside our party. In the final episode of Season 1, when our team is floating down the river Styx, IG-11 sacrifices itself, but Mando tries to talk the droid out of it. Nice setup and payoff there. Mando obtains equipment upgrade Jetpack in the final episode. Oh, also, Mando's name is actually Din Djarin, but I'm going to keep calling him Mando because it's easier to say. It's a good nickname. Okay, now let's jump to Season 2. Season 2 puts its meandering side quest episodes at the beginning, where Season 1 put a block of them in the middle. Season 2 begins with Chapter 9, The Marshal. In this side quest episode, Mando acquires quest item Boba Fett's armor. Timothy Oliphant's character is named Cobb Vanth. I have a really hard time remembering these characters' names. I've had to look up most of them. His character is a pretender wearing the Boba Fett armor. He's not a real badass like Mando. You can tell how much he's compensating by the size of his speeder bike. Also, they fight giant worms. It's like Dune or Tremors. It's pretty cool, and the production level is quite impressive. This episode is 52 minutes long and feels like a short movie. Chapter 10, The Passenger, is total filler. I originally fell asleep and had to rewatch it. Amy Sedaris gives Mando a quest to take this nameless frog lady to meet her husband so he can fertilize her eggs. Are you serious? This character doesn't have some crazy name to remember? Fine by me. The name of Amy Sedaris' character is Peli Motto, but I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. Baby Yoda eats a few of the eggs, which there was a bunch of controversy about online. I honestly didn't think much of it. Baby Yoda's always trying to eat things. It's part of the humor of the show. So in this episode, Mando fights ice spiders. Chapter 11, the Heiress. Mando arrives at his destination and completes his side quest. The frog people are reunited. I felt nothing about these characters. So Mando does the video game thing to do and wanders into a local tavern and throws some money around to get some information. He ends up being attacked by Lovecraftian fish people, but that's only a setup to introduce this group of Mandalorians who don't conceal their faces. This is the introduction of Bo-Katan, who is apparently from the cartoon show Clone Wars. They all go on a side quest where they take down this Imperial tanning bed dude. The show feels most shallow at moments where it's just people in cool armor, walking down halls, shooting lasers. The season gets progressively better after this episode, and it mainly exists to set up Bo-Katan for later. Chapter 12, The Siege, or Getting the Band Back Together. Again? So Cara Dune and Greef Karga are fun, memorable characters, so why not bring them back again? They have a specific mission of sneaking into the last Imperial base remaining on the planet and overloading its reactor. The blue guy who Mando froze in carbonite in Chapter 1 is back for comedic relief. It has a big chase at the end, and it's all reminiscent of A New Hope's Death Star sneaking mission and space turret gunfighting. This episode is also directed by Carl Weathers. Nice. The Rebel Cop from Chapter 10 shows back up at the end. The show does a really good job of picking up right after Return of the Jedi and showing how the fall of the Empire is playing out. Vestiges of the Empire still remain scattered as the rebel forces become the new dominating ones. It's a time of lawlessness and chaos in the Star Wars universe. Chapter 13, The Jedi, is where Season 2 really peaks. It has nothing to do with any previous attachment I might have to the character of Ahsoka Tano, though Rosaria Dawson is fantastic. Baby Yoda's name is revealed to be Grogu here, which I think is better than Baby Yoda. I'm glad they did this. Yoda's species was never given a name in any of the lore, so fans have no way of talking about it. Given the timeline, Yoda would be a Force ghost by now, so Baby Yoda is a total misnomer. This is not Yoda as a baby, it's Grogu. The name might sound silly, but you know what name also sounds silly? Yoda. It's just, we're so used to it, it doesn't sound silly anymore. But it is. The second half of Season 2 is great. Season 2 was starting to feel aimless. In Season 1, Mando overcame his hatred of droids. He learned how to be a dad and acquired new armor upgrades and equipment. Season 2 felt a little too meandering until halfway through when Ahsoka Tano shows up. For the rest of the season, Mando is trying to get Grogu to a Jedi. He has a direct purpose again. I really liked the look and design of the Fortress City in this episode. The quest here is to kill a Jedi in exchange for a Beskar spear. Talk about high risk, high reward, am I right? The Jedi has the clear visual inspiration of a Kurosawa samurai film. I love the way this episode looks. So Mando meets Ahsoka, and he decides not to kill her. Mando and the audience learn about Grogu. This culminates with a killer fight scene between Ahsoka and the Magistrate. The sound design of the lightsaber against the Beskar spear, the choreography of the fight, this is peak Star Wars. At the same time that the samurai-style sword fight is happening, there is a Western-style duel going on with Mando outside the gates. Mando's quest decision to side with Ahsoka pays off, as he gets the Beskar spear anyway. Our boy Mando is fully upgraded with jetpack, Beskar armor, and spear. All he needs now is a double jump and a hook shot. You know, so he can get across gaps easier without wasting his jetpack fuel. Chapter 14, The Tragedy, begins with some heartwarming stuff. Mando is telling Grogu that they will soon have to part ways. How sad. I thought these two would be forming bonds for a long time. And now they're having to say goodbye already? What will Season 3 be about? We'll get back to that in a minute. Grogu is reaching out to the Force to find a Jedi, and Slave One shows up. Slave One is the name of Boba Fett's ship. I used to have a toy of this. I kind of wish I still had it. It's a cool looking ship. In the original trilogy, Boba Fett was a shallow character. He was a guy in a cool suit of armor who spoke 4 lines of dialogue over 2 movies. Those 4 lines of dialogue are, "What if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me. Put Captain Solo in the cargo hold. He's no good to me dead." And, "As you wish." As soon as you thought this guy was going to do something cool, he fell into a Sarlacc pit and died. Except now, I guess he didn't die. So it does feel pretty good to see the Boba Fett character with many lines of dialogue and kicking significant ass. He can barely fit into the armor, which is funny because the armor was too big on Timothy Oliphant's character, who didn't deserve the armor but wore it to command respect. So now it makes sense as to why Fennec was set up in Season 1 and dragged off by a mysterious figure. Fennec is now Fett's right hand, and they make for an interesting pair in Season 2. This episode is directed by Robert Rodriguez. Chapter 15, The Believer, marks the return of Bill Burr's Mayhew from Season 1. I love how when he sees Boba Fett, we get a sound cue. And then Mando gets a different sound cue when he appears on screen. I like it when characters have musical themes or motifs that define them, and this score does it really well without ever relying on the Williams score. This episode is another infiltration mission. I tend to like infiltration mission style episodes. This has a good action scene on top of moving vehicles, where our team fights disguised in Imperial armor. Mayhew is deepened as a character as he confronts his past involvement as an Imperial trooper. Mando spends a lot of time with his helmet off here, perhaps after meeting Bo-Katan's group and also having his helmet off in front of a droid in the first season. His character is growing and changing, which is what I want out of a protagonist. I think this is a great lineup: Mando, Cara Dune, Fennec, Boba Fett, and Mayhew. It doesn't really matter what they're doing, it's just a cool ragtag group of characters like in a Final Fantasy game. Or the original Star Wars. Chapter 16, The Rescue. This episode features a slightly different lineup as Mayhew is replaced by Bo-Katan. Being the final episode of Season 2, this one is a really strong episode. It builds tension with the introduction of the Dark Troopers. The scene where Mando fights one of these troopers really emphasizes how powerful these droids are. So when a whole squad of them returns at the end, it really feels like our team is in a dire situation. The Deus Ex Machina here is Luke fucking Skywalker. This was set up in Chapter 14 when Grogu was seeking a Jedi through the Force. I liked the action scene in which Luke destroyed the powerful Dark Troopers, though the CG on his face was a little off. He looked fine when he first removed the hood. He looked fine when he was speaking and not moving his head, though it felt a little like a video game character with the limited movement. In one shot, he blinks twice and shifts his glance, gesturing towards Grogu, and the CG here is particularly video game looking. It's cool they brought back young Luke for a cameo, but what happens with Grogu now? The CG isn't good enough to have Luke as a regular character. We're not going to have a whole show about young Luke unless they found a younger actor, and filling the shoes of Mark Hamill would be a tremendous challenge. When this episode aired, people posted video reactions where they cried. It did not affect me emotionally in this way. I thought, hey, that's a cool resolution to the storyline of Season 2. The fight scene directly reminded me of the Darth Vader scene out of Rogue One. Both of these scenes could be viewed as fan service, but at least it's fan service well executed. It's okay to challenge an audience, but it's also okay to sometimes give fans something you know they'll like for sticking with the franchise for so long. Fan service can be empty and cringy, but The Mandalorian earns its fan service moments when it brings in characters like Ahsoka, Boba Fett, and Luke Skywalker, because everything else is done so well. It doesn't rely on the fan service to make it entertaining. The cameos are just the cherry on top of an already strong show. A post-credits scene sets up a Boba Fett show, which some people thought might be the 3rd season of The Mandalorian. Din Djarin's story with Grogu appears to be done, but now he is in possession of Moff Gideon's Darksaber, and Bo-Katan wants that Darksaber, so there are unresolved plot threads, meaning that Din Djarin's story should be continued in some manner. With the new Boba Fett show, there are 11 new Star Wars projects that have been announced, and that's just way too much Star Wars for me. I mean, variety is the very spice of life that gives it all its flavor, right? There are definite flaws I could highlight within this show. A lot of the characters are rather thin tropes, and there aren't a lot of big themes other than the theme of fatherhood, which is an undercurrent of the whole setup. In the end, this isn't a show that made me feel things. Well, except for when Nick Nolte died, and when Mando and Grogu parted ways. This is not a show that challenged me to think. It was not primarily an emotional or intellectual experience. The Mandalorian's a show where I frequently went, whoa, that's cool. It's visceral and flashy and fun with just enough heart and humor. The Mandalorian works really well as an escapist fantasy adventure, which might be what we all need right now.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way.